I will fight with honor.
Today's episode of Which Deck Shall We Put Bone Mare in Next is mid-range Paladin. Before I used a Murloc package as more of a fast deck. Now this time we're going to try out, to go with I guess the slower meta that seems to be developing, we're going to try out more of a deck that can go to like turn 7 or 8 and even get value in the late game. So we've got things like Tar Creeper, Stonehill Defender, Skelemancer, Spikeridge Steed and Bone Mare in the deck to help us have some legs in the late game. We've also got this new card, Righteous Protector, in the deck, which came out with the Frozen Throne expansion. So, it's looking very different to before, because the Frozen Throne cards really have changed it that much. And we're going up against a Token Shaman to show off what this deck can do. This is one of the games that I played on my experimentation games up the ladder, and I can say that I had quite a bit of fun with Paladin as a whole, but this particular mid-range build was one that I thought could be a good budget deck. So there's lots of different variations of Paladin going around right now. Some have the Death Knight, some don't. Well, if you don't have the Death Knight, you don't need it, because mid-range Paladin is good in its own right. If you've already built the Murloc mid-range Paladin, you can try it with that package too. I think that package is maybe even more consistent, but obviously the Frozen Throne expansions come out, so what's the point if we're not experimenting with some of the new cards? So, I've taken away the True Silver Champion, which is a card that I've sworn by in every single Paladin deck that I've ever made on this season, on this series of budget decks, I believe. In its place, we've got Rallying Blade and a small Divine Shield package. We've got 2 Argent Squires, 2 Righteous Protectors, and 2 Argent Protectors. Now with those 6 cards, it's likely that you're going to get value out of your Rallying Blade. Now there are other Divine Shield kind of combo-y minions in the game, namely Bolvar Fireblood, which came out of the new expansion, but obviously this is a budget deck, so we're not going to be using that. You may like to try other bits and bobs here and there, but this is the right amount to me. This seems right because they're all good in their own right, but you're not overcommitting. Other little combos in the deck also include Skelemancer, which on paper doesn't look like a great card, does it? But then you start to think, in practicality, in reality terms, a 2-2 that summons an 8-8 when it dies on your opponent's turn just means that it puts them into a lot of awkward situations. And those are the kind of situations that makes it really awkward for your opponent to trade. Now likely, they are probably going to get rid of it at some point, but it creates something that I've heard described as board tension. And that basically means that it becomes harder for the opponent to make a decision about whether they should trade, whether they should keep stuff alive, and sometimes they end up not attacking at all when you put things like Spikeridge Steed and Bone Mare buffs on your Skelemancer. So, Skelemancer, Bone Mare, and Spikeridge Steed are all very cheap cards, 2 commons and 1 rare, that make this deck really competitive in the mid to late game. It makes mid-range Paladin almost what it is, because if you get one of those buffs onto the Skelemancer and they don't have a silence, unfortunately he did, it's going to be really hard to deal with. Now I think if that player wasn't running Devolve, and a lot of decks don't run those kind of silence effects, the only ones you've got to watch out for are Shaman and Priest, really, at the end of the day. It's going to actually be quite good for you to run this little combo. Now another little card that you may be looking at in there is Chillblade Champion, and you may be thinking, what the hell is that doing there? Bobby, you've lost your mind, what is it? What are you doing? And to that I say, it's better than it looks. Now if you have the Epic and you're looking to run more of a control Paladin, the Epic, I can't remember the name of it. We're still early in the expansion. Anyway, the 3/9 for 6 mana, and every time you heal your hero, this card basically deals damage to the board. Now that's great in a kind of lifesteal package with, I guess, Burn Bristle and Corpse Taker. Obviously I'm running a budget version, but in its own right, I'd say Chillblade Champion is worth trying. Obviously it's a common, so you're likely going to just open it anyway, and with 6 buff cards in the deck, I think Chillblade Champion is actually viable. So you could actually count Argent Protector as a buff card as well, so let's call it 8 buff cards. So with all of those in the deck, it makes it so that Chillblade Champion actually can heal your hero for a lot. And if you attack face, then it actually heals for more than that because your opponent has to run their minions into it usually, and that just all around gives you a lot of healing in the late game where you otherwise wouldn't have it. So we're actually up against an evolved shaman running the Death Knight, and I'm not overly impressed by the Shaman Death Knight just yet. I know it can be really powerful, and obviously it's a low cost Death Knight as well. But, you know, as long as you keep clearing their board and you know how to play against a token shaman, as soon as you identify it, you should be okay. And a way to identify these kind of decks are they're just running lots of little minions out. Things like the Flame Elemental, and also Patches the Pirate as a big giveaway as well. So just keep clearing that board and you should be okay. Obviously, you're not going to get lucky every game, but it's a card game, you never do. The final card that I haven't spoken about, I think, is Cobalt. Yeah, the Cobalt Scalebane. So that's a 5/5 for 5. It's a deck that doesn't have many 5-drops, so putting in the Cobalt Scalebane does actually make a lot of sense in my brain. In practice, maybe it's not ideal, but in theory, you should have a lot of minions on the board at all times. This should be a deck that can almost guarantee a minion's going to stay alive, because you've got things like Divine Shields on your early minions, you've got Stonehill Defender and Tar Creeper, which are just awkward to remove, you've got Skelemancer, which is just going to stick around unless they have a way to silence it or hex it, and then you've got things like Spikeridge Steed, which is going to summon a minion after a minion dies. It's just basically a deck about being really annoying and making it really awkward for the opponent to trade. And those are some very unfortunate evolves for our opponent there, and that does mean that the game's going to swing in our favour. And against kind of token, aggro and mid-range decks, I found that this deck is quite effective indeed. Now we're going to be playing some more games on the ladder in a few days time and testing that theory against hopefully some control decks and seeing if it fares up. I think this kind of deck would need to beat the control decks quickly before they got any value, if that makes sense. So obviously that's going to be something that we have to experiment with. But there's the gist of the deck. It's all about just getting minions on the board and never letting go, really. And it seemed to work against the token shaman. So if you like the look of that, maybe give it a go and let me know what you think. I'll be back very soon for some more games. And if you haven't subscribed already, what are you waiting for? I'll be making some more Hearthstone videos very soon. And I will see you in the next one.